Welcome to Design to Move, a weekly functional movement series reviewing common movement impairment syndromes, muscle imbalances, and injury cycles and how to correct for them. Don't just exercise, but restore optimal movement. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Design to Move. My name is Ryan Maxwell. This is Ryan Parr. Again, we're two movement specialists here with Fluid Health and Fitness. Today we're going to go over another movement distortion pattern or compensation pattern. This one has to do with elevated shoulders. Now, the relationship of the shoulder on the rib cage has a lot to do with the placement of our pelvis. And we've gone into this in other topics and other videos, but today what we're going to do is talk about some of the singular relationships about how the upper traps and the neck flexors like the scalenes impact the placement of the shoulder and our inability to engage the muscle groups that help to keep the shoulder blade depressed and retracted inferiorly and posteriorly, which are going to be the rhomboids and the serratus. So a lot of information. The shoulder joint is pretty complex and can kind of be confusing. Today we're going to try to make it as simple as possible. And again, this is a pretty typical muscle imbalance with the upper shoulder shrugging and then rotating downward. So we're going to address that today, and this is going to go into a series of different distortion patterns around the shoulder. So that will be coming up in the next couple weeks. So keep your eyes out for that as well. Remember, we do have the topic listed in our description down below in a blog. Give a little more information on it. And we do have a table of contents to the side where we timestamp all the different segments of today's video, so you can go to one segment over the other, and then a condensed version of it at the bottom. We do offer a free movement analysis online. It's a virtual one, and we'd love to have you take advantage of that. So if you are interested and you want to get your own body evaluated, you can reach us at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. So on that note, we're going to get into our topic and get started. So this segment is mobility and release. Here's where we help you to release the overactive tension in the muscle groups. And in this case, it's going to be the upper trapezius, levator scapula, and scalenes. You're going to need a lacrosse ball for this one. First muscle we're going to target is the scalene muscles. There are three of them, and these are accessory respiratory muscles, meaning they assist with breathing and inhaling, so take breath in. A lot of times when our abdominals aren't strong enough, our ribs elevate, and we have a tendency to overuse our scalenes as a primary respiratory muscle instead of a secondary. It becomes tight. So when that muscle gets tight and we sit down and the rib cage falls forward, its attachment point from the rib at rib 1 and 2 pull into the cervical spine and then pull it into flexion. Okay, and that again pulls it forward so that the muscles on the back of our neck, our extensors, overwork, like our trap and our levator scapula. Right? So both of those become engaged because of this tension line. That's why today we're going to show you how to do the scalenes first and then use the muscle or the reduction of the trap and the levator to help restore the natural function of the shoulder and the neck. Okay? So to start with, what we're going to do is self-palpation. So we're going to use our fingertips. I'm going to use our first two fingers. And what you can do is define where the scalene is by tracing your sternocleidomastoid. It's this big ropey muscle that attaches the base of your skull at the mastoid here down towards the collarbone and the sternum. And if we go from inside, medial to lateral, again out, and you fish your fingers in there, there's a little recess, you'll feel some stringy-like muscles. And those are your sternos, or not sternos, but your scalenes. Now again, if you tilt your head laterally to the opposite direction, you'll feel the muscle stretch, and then you'll feel that little tension line increase, okay? So remember, the muscle pulls the neck into flexion on the lateral side, and it also, again, elevates the ribs. So what I'd like you to do, once you find the first set, the anterior portion of the scalenes, remember there's three, I'm going to push down into that bundle. I'm going to laterally tilt my head to the opposite direction. I'm going to breathe out, bringing the rib cage down, and you'll feel the pressure under your fingertips. And then relax, breathe in, bring your head up to neutral, and press back into the muscle itself. Okay, it should soften. Okay, so we'll do that again. Breathe out, laterally tilt the head, and you can look up a little bit to go into, again, extension through the neck. And then breathe out, or in rather, and then restore the balance of the neck. Okay, so this is a pin and stretch technique. It's a soft tissue mobilization. These muscles are again overused oftentimes. We want to make sure that we're delicate with this. If you feel a pulse under your fingertips, make sure to move away from that. You don't want to be on your artery. And again, you want to passively elongate the muscle and gently move the neck. There should never be pain or crepitus or creaking in the neck. If that's going on, make sure to stop. And again, if you are experiencing chronic pain, this is something that you would want to go and see a physician about, okay? So again, breathing is important. Breathe out as you go into length. And then as you come back to your natural passive tone, you're going to breathe in and then sink in a little bit. Now, if you want to get into the posterior side of it, you can just go a little bit deeper. So go a little bit more lateral towards your trap, and you'll feel that guy back there. Now again, those are normally pretty tight on most of us. Again, that attaches to the second rib. So I'm going to breathe out again, lateral tilt. And this time I'm going to look down a little bit. And as you look down, you'll feel that noticeable increase in pressure. And then again, come back up, breathe in, sink deeper into the muscle, and see if you can get the muscle to, again, elongate and to stretch out. So there it is. So those are your scalenes. Doesn't take a lot. Gentle pressure, maybe a couple pounds, if that, right? And you'd be surprised how quickly they release, and also how it restores your neck. A lot of times people will address their extensors, like their levator and their trap, trying to get rid of tension headaches, that kind of stuff. But really, it's a secondary relationship relative to the tension of those scalenes. And when you get those guys to relax, how much your shoulder actually naturally falls, and you feel that lack of pressure, again, being exerted on the skull and then into the neck. So pretty cool. Again, people are gonna love you at parties if you know how to do this, okay? Headaches be gone, okay? So anyways, we're gonna get into the trap now. Now, in order to get to the trap and the levator, we have to get into it with a ball. And Ryan's got his lacrosse ball here. You guys can grab one. Again, a ball would do. It doesn't have to be a lacrosse ball, but it's viscous and it's rubbery, so it'll help with grip. A lot of times people put it into a sock so they can reach it across, especially if they have pain in the opposite shoulder, so they can get to it. But either way, use the ball. And I'm going to show you where Ryan's trap is. Trap basically comes down from the neck, down along the collarbone and the ridge of the scapula, all the way down into the middle of his back. So this trap helps with elevating and, again, pulling the scapula downward, or rather upward. So it's pulling it up, elevating it, and inward towards the spine. Now, we're going to address the upper portion of the trap because our body has a tendency to overuse those based on the relative position of the rib cage. So we want to reduce the chronic tone of that muscle so we can get into the lower portion of the trap and the rhomboids that are responsible for pulling the scapula inward, retracting them, and again, subtly rotating it inward, okay, or downward. So what we're going to do is use the ball, and it's going to be just on the top of his scapula, close in towards his spine, right on the base of this. Now, if you go back and forth, you'll find that the levator scapula, again, another muscle that elevates the scapula, is involved there. And if our shoulder blade is downwardly rotated excessively because of the rib cage position, that guy is going to deserve your attention today. We're not going to get too deep into that. But again, you may feel that as, again, a byproduct of this soft tissue release that we're going to do, okay? So either way, take the ball. We're going to place it on the bulk of the muscle, right above the scapula. Ryan's going to lay down into it or sink down into it by drawing his body weight away from the wall. And then what we want to do is recognize that the trap would stretch if the scapula were to glide forward and around the rib, okay? So my arm would go forward, and if this were the case, my back leg would be behind me in extension. My weight's going to be back in my leg on the right side. Left leg is going to be forward. He's on his right side, and he's going to, again, tuck the chin, pull that head into, again, cranial extension, and then he's going to tuck or tilt his head to the side and reach his arm across the body and pull his scapula around the rib. So the scapula is going to glide transversely around the rib, and then bring the arm back down, sink into it, and again go back into a soft passive tone on the muscle. So we're going to tuck the chin, laterally tilt the head to the opposite side, draw the arm out into horizontal flexion, bring it in, reach the scapula around the rib, relax and sink. As you do that multiple iterations, you'll notice that the muscle starts to relax. You're able to get a little bit more lateral flexion out of the neck. And again, the arm might be able to glide a little bit further each time. Pretty cool. Okay. This is a great one. Once you understand how to do it, you'll notice how effective it is. You'll see how well your shoulders start to retract. And when they do, hopefully you'll feel a little bit more engagement on the medial, inferior, or lower portion of the shoulder blade, as opposed to feeling more of the shoulder shrug. And we see that oftentimes when people go into a row or again a scapular retraction, where their natural tendency is to elevate the shoulders and the head will again kick up into excess extension, right? So the neck will extend and the head will crane back. Okay. So we want to learn how to control that, reduce that relationship, and this will help you to do so. So remember, you're going to do about 6 to 10 breathing cycles through those scalenes and go through the trap. You might get the levator scapula as a byproduct, and that's okay too. And you would want to do both sides of the body to restore the natural function of the shoulder joint on the rib cage. And that brings us to the end of our mobility and release section. Now we're going to get into our next segment. It's called Activate. This is where we target specific muscles that are traditionally underactive or phasic, meaning that they're discontinuous from the central nervous system. So this topic is going to target the anterior serratus muscle. This is a protractor of the scapula, but it's also an inferior posterior depressor of the scapula, very important for scapular health, so we're going to target that guy. The muscle we're going to activate is the serratus anterior. This muscle is responsible for protracting the shoulder, so it literally pulls the shoulder into protraction, meaning gliding anteriorly or towards the front of the body, but it also helps to stabilize and depress the shoulder inferiorly or again behind you. So it's going to pull it down and back, so it holds it down on the rib cage. Pretty important because the muscles that pull it forward in the front of the body, like the bicep and the pec minor, have a tendency to distort the natural placement of that shoulder blade and by extension lead to the compression that gives us all those issues in the shoulder. So we want to really target this today and show you how to do so without having to overuse other muscle groups around the rib cage. Okay, so Ryan's going to do that by going into a wall serratus press, call it like a push-up plus. So what we want to do is not just move through the arm. A lot of times when people do this position, we're just showing you what they do and what not to do, is they just kind of push and round the spine, but they're not actually letting the shoulder glide around the rib. We want to glide around the rib, and we don't want to just use our external oblique to do the work. Okay, we want to learn how to control the rib and glide the shoulder around a fixed rib cage position. That's scapular thoracic glide, meaning the shoulder blade is going to roll over the rib. Okay. Now again, the shoulder would naturally go into that protracted state during gait when the leg would be in compression on the same hemisphere. So if I was going to work my right serratus, I would put weight into the right leg and reach forward with the right arm. Legs in extension, arms in flexion, and that flexion again is going to help to engage the serratus. Okay, so Ryan's going to do that today. He's going to take his fingertips, he's internally rotating the humerus or the arm. He's going to push through, breathe in, push his arm to glide around the rib, and then go into a little bit of thoracic flexion. So his back's going to roll a little bit. He's going to let that shoulder blade glide noticeably around the rib without losing the rib cage. And then he's going to breathe out and let the shoulder blade glide back towards the spine. Okay, so again, he's going to breathe in. Now as he does it, he's going to lift his opposite leg up. Press through, glide that shoulder blade around the rib, using the external oblique to hold the rib line down, feeding through that again, same neural drive, breathe out, and glide the shoulder blade back towards the spine. Okay? He's doing it in a slow, controlled movement. He's keeping his glute engaged on the brace side, so you'll notice that his hip is not rotating out externally like so. He's holding it neutral, pressing in, using his oblique external on his right side to hold the rib down, and then breathing out and bringing the shoulder back against it. Good job, Ryan. Okay, so we would want to make sure again that we go through about 2 sets of 20 repetitions. We start on the wall with a very little body weight. We also want to make sure that as we draw our arm up, we don't bring it up over our shoulder. And again, there should never be any pain or pinching in the front of the shoulder. If that's going on because the shoulder is already so internally, inferiorly rotated that we're getting impingement on that supraspinatus or rotator cuff, then you could actually do more damage. So if you're doing this because you're feeling discomfort in the shoulder and you're trying to accommodate that, make sure to see a medical professional and make sure that you're cleared for exercise before you do these exercises. But if it's something where you just general discomfort, go to town and make sure once again that as you do this, you don't over shrug. So if you have a tendency to be tight in that trap and you push too far, a lot of times people will shrug, or again, their hip will start to rotate back and they'll start to, again, round too much through the spine. So all of those things be careful of. And then again, you'll do 2 sets of 20 repetitions on both sides. Give yourself a minute of time in between, and then we'll get into our next segment. Our third segment is integrate. Here's where we show you how to engage the muscle groups that you normally don't like to use in the sequence of the movement patterns where your body starts to let go of its functional movement. Fancy way of saying you like to use certain muscles over others, and we want to teach you how to use the right ones at the right time. So today we're going to show you how to use the scapular retractors and depressors in concert with our breathing pattern in an upright gait cycle. You're going to need an exercise band for this one, so let's get into it. So today we're going to go into protraction and retraction using an integration movement. Protraction means that you're pulling the shoulder blade forward like we did with that serratus press, whereas the retraction is pulling the shoulder blade around the rib posteriorly towards the spine. As you walk, your arms do that in reciprocating motion. So one will go into protraction while one goes into retraction. Now the rib cage opposes that action as it plays against the rotational influence of the pelvis. So as I take a step and I put my body weight into load, my leg is going to go into a flexed position, my spine will go into flexion, and the arm will go behind into retraction as the opposite arm goes into protraction. So what we want to work on is maintaining the natural mechanics or integration of scaption and protraction as we go through the gait cycle. And we're going to do that with a band against the wall using a single leg balance with scaption. So Ryan's going to go ahead and place himself towards the wall. The band's going to be in his right hand. So to get into position, he would bring his body weight up through his right flexor, draw his leg up, and glide the shoulder around the rib cage as he draws his leg up. Now, as his leg goes into flexion, it pulls his pelvis down subtly and his spine will begin to flex. So his spine will start to lose its natural curvature, the lordosis of the lumbar and the cervical, and actually increase the kyphotic curve of his thoracic. That's supposed to happen as it gives the ribs a rounded curvature for the scapula to glide around. Now as he does that, he's going to breathe in, inflate his ribs without, again, opening up through the ribs because his abs are nice and tight, and then he's going to breathe out and let the arm come back down around the rib. So again, he's going to place his weight into his left leg, lift his right leg up, push through his left arm into protraction, and pull his right arm around the rib into retraction. So this contralateral reciprocation, meaning opposite sides of the body, reciprocating motion together, help to teach the nervous system how to engage motion efficiently. So he's shifting his center of mass to his left side, compressing the hip, lifting the opposite hip up into flexion, holding his thoracic or his rib cage internally with his ribs over here using his external oblique and his serratus, and again gliding the scapula around that nice rounded thorax that he's created by maintaining a neutral pelvic alignment. So we would go through 2 sets of 20 repetitions, making note that we try to go through as full extension flexion mechanism as we can. So you would flex through the one arm and retract through the opposite. Make sure that as you bring your body weight up into a center of mass or balance, that we don't see too much hip drop out, or again, see the hip rotate around. If you clench your glute, hold the pelvis neutral, you'll be able to glide the arm and use the trunk as it's naturally supposed to help maintain the center of mass through the hips. And then you'll get a deeper contraction of the lower mid trapezius and rhomboid as that arm glides around the rib cage as it's intended to. So again, we'll do 2 sets of 20 repetitions on both sides. Make sure to give yourself a minute of time in between to recover, and then we're going to finish it off with strength. Our last segment is strength. Here's where we show you how to isolate the muscle groups that need the most help We want to generally increase the stiffness of these muscles so that they're able to maintain their position and keep the posture of the joint centers naturally positioned. And in this case, we're going to target the rhomboids and lower mid-trapezius. And again, we're going to do that from a laying prone or facing down position, doing a cobra or a scapular retraction movement. So let's get right to it. So for our final segment, we're going to be targeting the mid to lower trapezius muscles and the rhomboid muscles. Both of these guys help to pull the shoulder blades back towards the spine and help to keep them from elevating too high up. Now the rhomboid will elevate the shoulder as well, so we want to make sure that by activating those serratus muscles, hopefully we keep the shoulder blade down in a pocketed position, so we don't want it to shrug as we draw the arms back. And again, what we want to do is focus on keeping the rib cage in a nice neutral and non-moving position. So we're going to do that by first breathing all the air out of our lungs, locking our abs down so that it depresses the ribs down. And then with the ribs in a depressed state, we can lift the scapula around the ribs towards the spine and let the arms come with it as they're in the socket as they pull back by working the external rotators of the arm or the humerus. Now you'll notice that Ryan's coming up. He's not hyperextending through his lower back, so watch what it looks like if he did that. He's really arching too heavily through the lower back. He's trying to keep his lower back, his lumbar spine, in a neutral, again, more of a, not a kyphotic or a lordotic, just a neutral position, but keeping his abs engaged as he draws his shoulders back. Now he's going to slowly let the shoulder blade glide around the rib cage and let his body come back down to the table. So there's going to be a slight back extension in this movement, but it's not excessive. So what we want to focus on, again, is keeping the ribs depressed by breathing out. Engage your abdominals. Hold that abdominal pressure. Breathe in. As you breathe in, pull the arms back. You can engage your gluteals at the top of that pullback and then come back down. This is called a cobra position or laying prone cobra because it, again, is supposed to resemble the hood of a cobra as the arms come back. And a couple points on this position, as we draw those arms back, we might want to think about pushing our fingertips down away from our shoulders, depressing the shoulders towards our heels, and our head is nodded down, so our chin is tucked. So we take some of the pressure off of these upper extensor muscles like the upper traps so we can get into the mid and lower trapezius portion. Breathe out and come down, and re-engage the abs. Okay, so you'll notice Ryan's coming up nice and slow and deliberately. He's going to hold the position for a couple seconds, and then he's going to slowly let the shoulders roll around the rib cage, bringing the arms back down towards the ground or table. And he's going to do that for 2 sets of 20 repetitions. And again, give yourself a minute of time in between. If you're doing it right, you should feel it right in the middle of the shoulder blades on the inferior medial border. And if you start to shrug and you start to notice that your neck starts to crane upward, that's a good indication that you need to stop doing that motion and then work up to the volume for the 2 sets of 20 repetitions. So there it is, laying prone, cobra, get after it. Thank you guys for joining us for another segment of Design to Move. We hope that you enjoyed it and you got something from this. Remember, the scapular position really is necessary to maintain the health of your shoulder joint. It's the platform by which your arm moves in. So if the positioning of the scapula is altered, then the way that the arm glides in the joint is going to be compromised, and that leads to the vast majority of shoulder pain that people experience. So pretty important that we get this under control, and also remember that the scapular position is relative to the positioning of the rib cage. So once again, this isn't an isolated issue, this is a global issue. It has to do with the pelvis, the legs, the muscular attachment points, again, abdominal pressure, all these other things. And again, we're going to be talking more about that in future weeks around abdominal pressure and thoracic positioning. So make sure to look forward to those weeks and follow along as we educate you about your body. Remember, we do have a blog on the topic, so it is in the description below. Make sure to give that a gander. And we do have the opportunity to reach out to us if you have any specific questions. We want to hear from you, and we do want to give you those virtual free assessments. So you can do so by reaching out at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. Again, between the Ryans, we say thank you for joining us, and we'll see you for another episode of Design to Move. Remember, your body's designed to stay in motion, so stay with it, and we'll see you next week.